Well, hello. Thanks for hanging out and listening to some music with me. I'm going to be the disembodied voice that you're going to be hearing throughout the course of this video. I'm Nix. Good to meet if we haven't met before. So let's just jump right into it. 2017 was a wild year for movies.
2017 saw the reemergence of really specific genre fare, and even a true interrogation of our past genre fare. It was quite a year for genre, specifically the horror one. For instance, The Shape of Water is an incredible film about the creature from the Black Lagoon, and our past aversions to seeing a completely harmless, even healthy love story as something vile that must be stopped at all cost. The villain of The Shape of Water is the hero of the creature from the Black Lagoon, and what with all the buzz surrounding the film, talking about how shocking it was that there was a movie where a woman had a healthy relationship with a fish man, one might even argue that our past fears of non-traditional relationships are still with us. Would you be surprised? I would not. Get Out is a social horror film about the terror of society out to get you, whether intentionally or not. The feeling of being lesser, the feeling that you are a thing to be harvested and not really a person but a vehicle for people to look like allies. It's a paranoid movie. It's a movie that uses the horror genre and its staples to communicate a message that often goes unheard. It encourages us to find empathy for the plight of the characters, and that becomes a vehicle by which we can feel empathy for minorities and marginalized people, as well as criticism for the social context we all belong to. Annabelle Creation, yes, is a film about disability and how those that are disabled feel that they're a burden on those around them, and how we should feel empathy for those people that need help but feel terrified to ask. Yes, even the Annabelle sequel tackled a tough subject. What the hell is that about? Creep 2 is a found footage movie about the relationship between journalists and monsters, and how when we get too close to a person, we can often be blinded to the terrible things they're capable of. This is an idea explored in Netflix's Mindhunter as well, that when you meet someone monstrous, they feel like humans, and until we accept that they are humans, we can't really gain anything from them other than the role they try to play. And we need to be aware of and careful that we don't incidentally excuse or partake in what made them monstrous. We have to empathize and understand to know how to tackle these people in the future, but we can't become them in the process.
Also, Wish Upon was hilarious. I don't know if you've heard of this, but oh my god.
And that's just the horror movies. I mean, don't get me started on sci-fi. Seriously, if we bring up Blade Runner 2049 or Alien Covenant, we will be here all day. Trust me. Through these examples, we can see something that we don't often see, or maybe it's just a matter of our cultural perception. It's always been there, but we can't see it. We refuse to see it, or we legitimately don't believe it's there. Meaningful genre films are here, and they want your blood, and they're gonna get it too because they're amazing. I could easily make a lengthy video about any of the previously mentioned movies, and so many more, simply because there's a lot to talk about and analyze. But here's where I acknowledge that something is missing from that list. What could it be? It is a movie that totally embodies this shift. Not just in our genre fare having meaning, which is not new, but in our ability to really have a conversation about what our genre fare means as a whole. It's a film that can be easily used to break down the fundamentals of what the horror genre is, and how it's used, and what can be done with it. It's a movie that does not mess around in both being pure genre fare and meaningful commentary. The intent is clearly to scare you, and in most instances I think it was successful in doing that, but those scares actually mean something. My point is, it's not pretending to be more than it is. It's a horror film about an interdimensional alien clown murdering and eating children. But it's also so much more than that, and that's what we're here to talk about. That duality. Goofy, ridiculous, absurd genre fare, and how that means something to us often more than what we can immediately know. I don't mean the movie operates subliminally, it makes these things the core of what builds the movie. It's a movie about kids fighting a clown, and Finn Wolfhard is gonna kill this f***ing clown, and I think the best place to start is right there. Without delay, let's talk about that clown. Part 2, that clown. My god, it's so hideously evil. Pennywise is a complicated beast in this new film. There's a lot to pin down and it's difficult to even know where to start. I want to talk not about why he's so scary, boo, gotcha. I want to talk about his character. See, there's this weird thing that happens where we look at movie monsters not as motivated characters, but as objects of the story. Like, the killer come to kill him. He gotta do it. Everybody look out. Boy, that sure was scary. Do you guys want to go to Wendy's? My point is, they are characters, and in a lot of senses, they transcend even that. They are a lot more than simply a physical obstacle for the other characters' stories. They are the story. Now, this might turn some heads, but horror villains are metaphors. Like, they're metaphors for stuff. Overcoming, transcending, or failing in their midst is the story of the horror film. Like Michael Myers, for instance. I've made a video about all this, but we're gonna do it again. He isn't just some killer to move the plot of Halloween along. To Laurie Strode, he is the force of change coming to make her rise to her limitations. She struggles to live the life she wants, free of her mental obstacles, and Michael Myers embodies those mental obstacles, literally attacking her in order for her to transcend and overcome them. And at the end, she is changed. Michael Myers can't die because, to Laurie Strode, her mental blocks keep coming back to get her over and over again. Oh, and at the end of the movie, a psychologist comes in and shoots Michael Myers with a gun, and even that doesn't kill him. So what do you suppose that has to say about psychologists? But there's an added layer to this Halloween bit here that is Michael Myers' actual characterization. He not only means something specific to Laurie, but he means something to culture. Again, I made a whole video about it, and I'm not gonna make you sit through it again. But Michael, as a character, is a person that had a violent, seemingly unmotivated outburst early on in his life, was imprisoned, and treated for the rest of his life as if he was this horrible, evil thing, and no longer a person. And this didn't allow for anyone to really understand his internal psychology and why he would do such a terrible thing. Thus, the mask he dons is pale and faceless, and he no longer possesses identity. He's even credited as the Shape and not Michael Myers, because he is now the formation of his inner evil, unquestioned and unleashed upon the world. Okay.
So the bottom line, horror villains, horror characters are essentially the story. And with that, we can get into Pennywise and what his whole deal is. And now you see why we've started here.
Pennywise is the story of the 2017 It film. Part 3, who the god dang shit is Pennywise? So we're back to that same annoying ass question of where do we even start? I guess the best thing to do is talk texturally and kind of discuss his semiotics. Then I can hit you with the big he means this thing. Okay, here we go. Pennywise is a character within a character who has an awful lot of conflict, actually. He's an interdimensional evil that came to Earth to eat the fear of children. Well, and also to just eat them. He eats the kids. But he came here long ago and took the form of the thing that he felt would get him closest to kids. You know, a clown. And it can be assumed that this worked out just fine for a really long time because the story is taking place in the 80s. But there's our first huge problem for Pennywise. It's the 80s. Literally no one gives a frigging shit about clowns. Matter of fact, most people see them as evil monsters, so there's a huge hurdle that he's just been presented. He's really great at this clown thing, like he's adopted it, it's like his favorite thing to do, but he can't just walk down the street and eat kids anymore. A clown is rather suspect, especially when it looks like this. Pennywise is antiquated bait, and this kind of frustrates him. This interdimensional creature donning the clown getup is all at once evil as all shit and kinda childlike, and this gives him this sort of vulnerable quality that does have a bit of an effect on some. Mainly Georgie. It works on Georgie. He eats Georgie because Georgie takes the goddamn bait, because he's at that age of trusting just about everything, but the older kids can't see him as anything other than purely horrible, and thus he struggles to really get close to them. But he finds them desirable because they are the most miserable kids in town, and who wouldn't want to snack on that sweet, sweet misery? There lies the conflict of his character. He wants what he can't seem to get because he is an antiquated form of bait that doesn't really work on them.
I'm not afraid of you.
He wants the miserable kids that fight back and are hard to pin down. But what his character needs to do is go feed on the Georgies in town because he's really goddamn hungry. But his wants conflict with that need. Thus, he's hungry, desperate, and angry. And when you get desperate, you get sloppy, and thus the illusion is broken to a bunch of kids that realize what's happening in the town that no one talks about and sets out to confront it. Presumably something that has never been done before. And when the kids gang up on him, he doesn't know his limitations. He gets stabbed in the face with a rusty pipe. Oh shit, I have f***ed up now. So he crawls back in his hole, licks his wounds for a little while, but eventually that desire comes back, he's just gotta have them. Whatever, I can take them, they're just kids. So he goes after Beverly Marsh, knowing it will lure all the kids to him, where he can pick them off one by one. However, best laid plans, right? It doesn't work, and they beat the shit out of him until they see him as this, pathetic shell that he is, and he desperately tries to take just one kid back into the hole with him. Come on. Just give me one. But then Richie's gotta kill that f***ing clown, and he slinks back into his hole defeated for 27 years. This might all sound strange given that it's completely from Pennywise's perspective on the story that doesn't really focus on him, but it's essential that we really motivate the character and what he wants and needs and how those things conflict to get to the bottom of what he actually represents in a larger sense. This is one half of what makes the character such a resonant one. The other half is where I come clean and talk about him on a purely metaphorical level. Now one might say, hey, you just finished humanizing this monster for us and making his conflict real. How are you now going to backpedal into saying he's just a metaphor? Well, first of all, you can all go to hell.
And secondly, we need to be aware of the actual philosophy of movies and how they work. Imagine you're having a dream so vivid you're certain it's reality. There are obvious tells that you're in a dream, and if you really consider how real what is happening to you is, you will wake up, but in the moment, you're suspended in this state where you're fairly willing to buy into the unreality. This allows you to process a lot of your own fears and desires by way of abstraction. In the dream, maybe you're looking everywhere for someone, but you can't find them. Clearly, this can be a stand-in for you feeling as if you've lost someone in your actual reality outside of the dream.
Matter of fact, there's this amazing movie about this exact same thing called Mulholland Drive, and you should pause this video and watch that movie right now. Hey, it's only 2.5 hours long, so I'll wait. This is what a movie is, in essence. It's a dream wherein we, through abstraction, are given the ability to confront what things actually mean. Movies are this wonderful, subjective world where things can exist and not exist at the same time. They can be outlandish and ridiculous and not conform to reality whatsoever, but can mean something very specific to anyone that sees it. These things can be very stark and different things, or occasionally, they can be so intentioned that they become accessibly obvious. And now we can get back to Pennywise. So Pennywise is an abstraction of a larger concept. In the dream of the movie, Pennywise is real. He's scary, he has real depth to his character, and a story all his own. But he is both real and unreal at the same time. He is both. So the idea now comes down to figuring out what he is an abstraction for, much like Michael Myers is an abstraction for Laurie Strode's personal hurdles. So let's just talk semiotics then. Pennywise lives under the town of Derry, in the sewers, metaphorically the undercurrent of the town, but also an important foundation for what Derry is. This establishes a clear environmental claim that Pennywise lurks within Derry as a whole, and as is made blatantly obvious in the film, Pennywise targets kids and feeds on their suffering. This fosters a total environment where kids are born into a place where they are targeted from a young age with misery, fear, and abuse. They are born into a place that has a historic and unending cycle of kids being chewed up and spat out. And until the events of the film, this has gone unquestioned by any parental authority. It is assumed that the parents came through the same system growing up here, but have failed to be aware of or accept the patterns and have instead become part of the very system itself. Mike Hanlon lost his parents in a horrible fire, and now labors at a place where he is trained to slaughter animals. Because he isn't allowed to really express how this has affected his life because he lives in an environment that doesn't allow him to be emotional, visions of burning people manifest and torment him. Ben Hanscom is the new kid in town and is immediately bullied for his weight. Feeling out of place in a new town, he researches the history of Derry only to find that it's got a bloody history. His new home might be a toxic one that he can't escape. Thus, he sees a vision of a headless boy representing that historical fear. Bill lost his younger brother to Pennywise some time back, which he internalizes and blames himself for, as he wasn't there to watch over him because he was too sick to leave the house. And then poof. His parents have detached themselves from the family, probably blame him as well, and he is forced to deal with his guilt by himself. Thus, Georgie is the manifestation of that guilt, and it tortures him. Eddie is a hypochondriac because his mother has attempted to protect him from everything so much that he's become paranoid and terrified of the world around him. It becomes clear in an amazing moment what his real relationship to his mother is when he drops all of his pills in the street, desperately picks them up off the concrete, and puts them back in the bottle for future use. He's terrified of getting sick and being vulnerable, yet he's willing to take pills that have been on the ground because he's more terrified of his mother's reaction. And then immediately after, he's attacked by a leper, which is a manifestation of his inner conflict. Beverly Marsh is a young woman going through, your typical puberty, yet is bullied for being sexually promiscuous, although there is no evidence for this. At home, her father is clearly sexually abusive, fixating on her hair, which she cuts off as an act of detaching herself from what her father fixates on. She is attacked by visions of that hair and blood, symbols of her changing physicality that she has no outlet for. She can't talk to anybody about these sorts of things. She's totally alone in that. Stan is a Jewish boy growing up with the expectations that come from being the son of a religious leader in the community. When this doesn't ultimately end up being the path he really wants to take with his life, he's rejected by his father and left alone. He fixates on this painting of a woman with a flute in his father's office that comes to life and attacks him. Richie is a loudmouth, crude, and constantly ironic character that tries to distance himself from all the other problems faced by the group because he struggles to present himself socially. He's clearly not what he wants to be and must instead make himself more appealing through constant joking, something I can relate to, let me tell you. And thus he's afraid of clowns. But then in an amazing moment, when he actually is confronted with his greatest fear, he sees himself dead, and that terrifies him the most. Maybe it's not necessarily clowns that's his greatest fear, but dying. How Pennywise is ultimately defeated is through the kids not individually overcoming a portion of their own struggle, but in how they band together as a group, talk through their struggles, and learn to accept and overcome them together. Pennywise is defeated when he is shown for the system that he is, a system that forces us to confront our problems by ourselves, dive inward to save face, and grow up to resent the world around us because we feel misunderstood. In this way, the movie clearly posits that it's important to create a support network to fight off these abusive patterns and cycles that present themselves in our society. And by opening ourselves to connect with others through empathy and understanding, we are able to kill that f***ing clown. But he's never really killed, just stuffed back into his hole until the next generation of kids comes along and is susceptible to the same fate, unless we maintain this positive and supportive climate and pass on our values. There's a moment at around the halfway point in the film that presents us with a very clear artistic choice and kinda shows its hand. One of the key aspects of how the movie functions lies directly in a simple shot. So Pennywise is attacking one of the kids in the house, and then Beverly stabs Pennywise in his face with a sharp rod or something like a pipe. Now blink and you'll miss it. You might not even think anything of it when you actually pay attention to it, but I'm gonna read into it. When Beverly slams that thing into his face, blood flies out of his head, hitting the camera.
This is an extremely telling style choice that lends itself to the entire visual design of the whole film, really. This is an intentional fourth wall break. See, typically in film, we don't want to be aware that we're watching anything at all, or at least that's the mentality with movies that try to have a more objective shooting style, observational distance and all of that. But blood hitting the camera, it makes us aware of our own vision, and the blood is hitting us, which puts us figuratively in the scene with the characters.
We are there too. We are part of the Losers Club. We are one of the kids. Considering the themes of the film, observing, understanding systems of abuse present in our lives and banding together with a supportive group to overcome those systems, this makes us responsible as well because it surrogates us within that group. Whenever Pennywise is attacking one of the kids on screen, we see Pennywise coming directly at us. The soundscape is so maximally aware of our presence that it seems all sound in the film is designed specifically to get a rise out of us. It's not about being subtle and creepy and observationally distant, it's about attacking us. This story isn't one we simply sit back and observe. It happens to us, and therefore implicates us to be part of the events of the film and the themes of the film. We are meant to be aware of and challenge our own systems of abuse. And then at the end of the film, the kids agree to return in 27 years to fight those systems yet again and prevent any further damage to the next generation. And as we are one of the group, this beckons us to be aware of these things ourselves and prevent damage to the next generation in our actual reality. The responsibility falls on the audience to maintain these things in the real world. And regardless of whether this message connects with audiences or not, it reveals a very important aspect of filmmaking and narrative that we often don't talk about.
Maximalism as a style. Reality versus unreality, and how we ultimately kind of see unreality as having this accessible kind of meaning. Welcome to the point. So we have this sort of preconception that in filmmaking, reality is kind of the most important thing. We talk about making things real. The drama in the film got real. The actors' performances were so realistic. The dialogue between the characters felt so realistic. If you've spent time on the internet, you get it. We hear this shit a lot. And it's a mostly unchallenged position that films need to be real, but I'm going to challenge that now, so get your pitchfork ready. Okay, reality, not really something that we're trying to achieve as filmmakers because we're ultimately storytellers, and the idea is more that we kind of build a put together, kind of fabricated reality, you know what I mean? It's unreal realism, I guess. It's a simulation of reality that isn't necessarily reflective of reality itself. You know, ultimately, whenever you make an edit or a camera angle choice or a sound design choice or a color choice or any sort of visual design choice, you have altered the objective world of the reality in which we all live and have entered into the world of the subjective. So welcome to the world of the subjective. It's great here. I like it. How does the camera choose to see these characters? And, how is this world designed? Because it is designed. Why are we putting two shots together, and what meaning is ascribed from doing so? What we're really striving for in the visual narrative landscape is something more along the lines of a believable humanity. We want to feel like we understand, people and, who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, empathize with them. Maybe we're, familiar with the struggle that's presented on screen, or at least we can, empathize with the struggle or understand what's going on screen. That's what people mean when they say they want somebody to feel real. But ultimately, this is as real as a dream could be. But just as I said before about movies being dreams and dreams being kind of our way of exploring tangible real world parallel questions and all of that, there is something to be said about the intangible being presented as tangible, you know what I mean? And hey, what do you know? There's a great video about the Uncanny Valley by Shannon Strucy, which I'll link in the video description. Shout out to Shannon. You're doing great work, Shannon. The ultimate point is that falsehoods can be used to make us see truth more clearly.
It is a movie all about this sort of thing. The movie acts as a rear view mirror by which we can see the past through critical eyes using an abstraction that stands in for truth. It's a difficult question to ask somebody about their past trauma, but it's very easy to see it as a killer clown attacking you, and through that we become aware of how these sorts of things truly affect us. The pain, the fear, the mistrust, the paranoia, that feeling of being unloved and without help are real. The clown is just a device by which we can experience these ideas safely.
So there lies the greater point that I brought up at the very beginning of this video. Genre film gives us the ability to look at the world through a safe abstraction and, feel the viscera of like the horror or the action, or, the intense emotions and meaning that comes with all of that, but, through a falsehood. Ultimately, this is what makes a story affecting in the first place. This is why we tell stories. Even from something like the earliest cave paintings, we see like true human experiences, told through the stories of the gods or through some other kind of mythology, because these are, human abstractions in which, we convey meaning. Ultimately, here we are in contemporary times and we're still doing the same thing. And I think we need to be aware of that, so we could maybe talk about art more meaningfully and make art that more connects with culture.
If it proves anything, it's that very basic thing. A movie came out that was about a spooky clown that eats children, and it is both accessible and affecting and worth analysis because everything is worth analysis.
I guess I think that we just kind of owe each other that, like instead of just always defaulting to this sort of thumbs up, thumbs down mentality that we have. But when it all comes down to it, we're all looking for meaning and the truth in the world and all of that. And if we owe each other anything, it's a conversation of that right there. What about this is strange? Or what about this is not reducible to other things? Why focus on what makes everything the same? And instead, why not ask, what makes this in particular different than everything else? What about this work really means something to us? And also, is this challenging or reinforcing our situation? Is this spectacle? Or is this spectacle with some sort of guiding purpose? There's so many questions that one could ask, about, how this works or what this has to do with our larger situation. But we always default back to this, like, it was good, it was bad, and it's such a disappointment. The worst thing is how genre film in specific, is wholesale disregarded. Even though, like, it presents its meaning in the most visceral way. The craft, the functionality, the meaning of these things, they're all kind of discarded because, we need to perpetuate this, like, stereotype that, it's inferior to some other kind of art because, genre film has such tangible and direct goals. A lot of critics out there think that, like, the horror genre and the action genre and the comedy genre and all of this, that they're, like, made for idiots or something, and just to make themselves, like, appear better than the people that find it valuable. When it comes down to it, it's like a failure to ask questions of something before asserting ourselves into the conversation and, making ourselves appear better than those out there that are actually trying to engage with culture. It's also just like a failure to realize, like, the inherent value that something like this has to those that find value in it. At best, I think that criticism has the ability to speak to what is untrue about a work, and I think a lot of great critics throughout history and even still today, that is what they're doing, and it's great. But so often, I find that is just not the case, and I think that is a massive disappointment. I think we can do better than that. So I guess just to kind of wrap up here, maybe it's just this.
A movie about a spooky clown attacking children, but it's a movie about the experience of being a kid and feeling like the world hates you. feeling alone, feeling lost and hopeless, feeling like bad stuff happens for no reason. And the truth is, sometimes bad shit happens for no reason. And we should all learn to be more empathetic to those struggling. And sometimes the best way to impart some empathy is to attack them with abstraction. And now when we see that clown, like in the real world, we'll know what it is.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown.
Hello, it me. So, elephant in the room, this video took a lot longer than I expected because, as I've kind of addressed in previous videos, I was graduating college and also working on like moving out, and I'm also juggling a bunch of projects right now. And then I was also over on Mike Newman's channel, Film Joy. I was on Deep Dive, their show about loving kind of underappreciated movies. If you're interested in seeing me in live action with Mikey Newman, you could do that right now by going over to FilmJoy. So I really quickly wanted to thank my patrons for supporting me throughout this time, and hopefully that like you're loving the content that I'm putting out. I'm making it for you, so I really hope you're into it. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do an awful lot of what I do now without your support, so it's really nice of you to be here and lend a hand, especially in this time where it's very difficult. But anyway, so new stuff coming soon, working hard all the time. Thank you guys for being here. Check out the links in the description. Also, I'm streaming on Twitch a lot more, so you should go follow me on Twitch so that you can watch me play Stardew Valley. Yeah. Okay, bye!